President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has issued a new executive order designed to lower project costs, attract investment, and enhance revenues from oil and gas operations. The Upstream Petroleum Operations Cost Efficiency Incentives Order 2025 introduces performance-based tax incentives for upstream operators who deliver verifiable cost savings that meet defined industry benchmarks. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, will publish these benchmarks annually according to terrain, onshore, shallow water, and deep offshore. Additionally, detailed implementation guidelines for the new order will be issued in due course. Among other provisions, the order returns to investors 50% of incremental government gain resulting from cost savings and also caps available tax credits at 20% of a company's annual tax liability, protecting government revenues while still offering strong fiscal terms to incentivize efficient operators. To ensure the effective implementation of the new order, the President has tasked the Special Advisor on Energy with leading interagency coordination, ensuring alignment across key government institutions, and translating policy intent into measurable outcomes. Joining us on this show to discuss this latest order by President Tinubu, which is aimed at reducing project costs, boosting investment, and increasing revenue in Nigeria's oil and gas sector, is Esili Eigbe, Director at ESCAP Management. Good morning, Mr. Eigbe, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Dr.
Yeah. So, well, the executive order, these are projections, these are just promises. These are just ambitious projections. We've had many executive orders in this country that did not work. In the spirit of the midterm scorecard assessment of the Tinubu administration, I would like you to start with an assessment of the oil and gas sector in the last 2 years, what the major challenges are. The one that we Nigerians are more passionate about is the fact that billions were spent on Port Harcourt refinery last year. And now, in less than 6 months, we're told that that refinery will have to be shut down for another 6 months. Shouldn't they sell these refineries as scrap to private investors and let whoever wants to do anything with them do whatever they want to do with them? The other major issue in that oil and gas sector, not the executive order, is the fact that we have a new NNPCL board. That board has been inaugurated. What will be your task, your challenge to that new board? Let's talk about the industry, not promises.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, I'll say that if you may, I'd like to speak to the executive order. I disagree in the sense that I do believe that those orders are quite meaningful, and they've already brought a lot of investment to Nigeria over the course of the last 2 years. Amongst the executive order in that industry that have been issued over the course of late 2023 and early 2024, I think one of the most important, for example, was a tax incentive that was introduced for offshore gas production and oil production, where ONG producers there could earn as much as 30% tax rebate on production over a certain level, given that they're willing to commit to FID before January 2029. That has already brought or led to quite a number of players already announcing FID ahead of 2029 or some point over the medium to long term. As the Special Advisor to the President on Energy Matters would say, they've been able to attract commitments of close to about $8 billion. That actually means a lot. Specifically, Shell has committed about $5 billion to its Bonga project, Total about $1 billion, and quite a number of others. And it's also spurred activity within the downstream sector, where we've seen, I would say, most of the IOCs made major divestments to indigenous locals. That alone has, resulted in transactions worth, I would say, north of about, $4 or $5 billion. So it is very significant, if I just might correct that. And we're continuing to see it have obviously impact going forward. I'll add that this particular directive is more focused on or signaling cost discipline, which is very important because what that essentially does is that it then helps to reposition Nigeria as a cost competitive environment for oil and gas producers. And it's very important because as transformative as the PIA was, okay, the PIA did not take cognizance of the fact that Nigeria wasn't operating, or it didn't take cognizance of the fact that Nigeria is operating in a global competitive landscape, or regional landscape. Yeah. So what a number of these executive orders do is to try to address that. And obviously, what we do expect is we will see sustained investments, commitments in the oil and gas industry over the coming years. Now, to your question around the refineries, I share your concerns over the fact that those refineries obviously haven't realized, I guess, the amount of perhaps whole production that was anticipated. Again, but that was more a reflection of, just how the NNPC was communicating the level of expectations, given the amount of investments that have gone into them. My proposal to the government would be to find a lasting solution, which would very likely include privatizing, selling those refineries off to private sector investors that can efficiently bring them back to, if not full production, at levels that are, I'll say, cost competitive enough to, to operate. Now, with respect to your question around, how should I challenge or charge the board of the NNPC? There's clearly so much that the NNPC needs to do. One of the first mandates that the PIA has already, given the NNPC is for it to privatize. It's a process that is still ongoing. And hopefully what I would expect this board to do is to try and fast track that process. Beyond that, I imagine that one of the initial mandates that the board has been given, again by the presidency, is to take a complete audit of the NNPC. So try and understand what assets obviously come within the confines of the corporation, and see how well they can optimize those assets. I would say that from a more medium to long-term perspective, I would say that the NNPC ought to be charged with consolidating all of Nigeria's oil and gas assets to a point where they can boost production to a level that benefits every Nigerian.
All right. Now let's look at, you touched on obviously incentivizing an efficient cost per production, which is ultimately, that's the whole idea of this executive order, is to try and, bring down, Nigeria has notoriously become the country with the highest cost.
It's been high, about, I'll say $25 on average. You compare that to, say, Guyana, Angola, where it's less than $15.
It's one of
Saudi Arabia, $5.
$5. Yeah. So one of the highest in the world. Now, what a lot of people are saying is that, well, the tax incentives, great, but this doesn't address the real issues that actually cause that high production cost. Security issues, old infrastructure, vandalism, which also falls under security. So many people are saying that, are we not looking at the wrong issues at the wrong times? The priorities are wrong. Why can we not focus on creating an enabling business environment before sacrificing much needed tax revenue to attract investors? Your take on that?
So you're very right in that. And I suppose if I was given more time, that would have been perhaps my next engagement in that. You can't have these executive orders in isolation. I mean, clearly, having a very secure environment for ONG players to operate is very essential. You had, years of oil theft, which in itself do not help with the cost efficiency numbers. So addressing that, again, the government have been working on these issues, okay? They'll tell you, for example, now that oil theft has declined to somewhere around, I think the last official number I heard was 5,000 barrels a day from over about 130, 150. So that's quite some improvement, okay? But there are even, I would say, others that are even more systemic, like, for example, the local content policy, which obviously insists or drives the preference for sort of local content, where the ONG players are required to use Nigerian companies, even in cases where sometimes they cost more than 5 times what it will cost to bring in an international player to do the same job. Again, there have been executive orders that have sought to address a challenge like that, making sure that the operators that obviously are being considered, meet the profile, etc. But, I suppose that it will take some time for that sort of culture, that systemic culture, to change over time. There are other issues as well, like, protracted contracting, obviously where the NUPRC and NNPC are involved, particularly in JV projects, that, again, there are already executive orders that speak to this, but it will take time for, the culture to change. The NNPC as well, or is it NUMS? NNPC NUMS have, veto power, for example, to shut down, certain projects or budgets that have been, allocated or directed to certain projects that may have been initiated by, IOCs or, whoever their independent partners are, particularly on the JVs. And, these are, I think, some of the, if you want to call it, challenges that are sort of more systemic that I think that perhaps need to be addressed before you can start to really see some of those cost efficiencies really come through. Otherwise, it's one thing for you to, target improving operating efficiency, but if you don't have the, the environment or the, if you don't take out the bureaucracy that allows the, the companies to do so, then they don't really stand a chance of capturing them or even optimizing those tax benefits.
Thank you very much, Esili. I know we're running vastly out of time, so it looks like we only have 1 minute to ask the question and answer it. But you've touched, it seems as though you've been quite fair, really, in your submissions. On the one hand, you do think that this executive order is a positive thing, and then you also admit that perhaps there could be other ways that the federal government can be targeting efficiency in different ways. So if you're looking, do you think that essentially what we are seeing here is putting the cart before the horse? Do you think that these things can be handled simultaneously, or do you think how the federal government has done it, where they've started with this executive order, is the best way forward? What order really should be?
So as I implied, they were already executive. So the government already issued about 4 or 5 executive orders, late 2023 into early 2024. Yeah, so there are already a number of those executive orders that sought to tackle some of these issues, like local content, fast tracking, contracting times, things like that. But as I sort of also alluded to, in bureaucracies like this, it usually takes time for you to sort of change the culture. Yeah. So what I would like to hammer on is that having set sort of this sort of cost efficiency goals in place, it will be important if the government itself, or perhaps even through the Office of the Special Advisor, press on making sure that some of the expected impact of some of those executive orders that were issued in 2024 meet the expectations that they were meant to achieve, such that the cost efficiency goals that you're setting now with this particular order, okay, are realizable.
Well, thank you, Mr. Eigbe. Despite all of this, executive orders, crude oil theft continues unabated. We don't even know how much crude we produce or we sell. Crude oil production is still at a low level. So what we just get are promises. But in any case, I like your optimism. We'll see how it goes.